Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, it's telling that at the top of those opposites' priority list is to move motions in this place which pat them on the back and congratulate them on their time here as being the government for the last 6 months. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the federal member for McPherson, I'd like to start by saying 6 months is quite the milestone since the last election, and I thank the people of McPherson for giving me the opportunity to represent them in this place. It's an honour that I never take for granted. But in light of the motion that we're seeing here today, it also reminds us of the 6-month record of this Albanese Labor government. And it's a record that the Australian people can see is not good. The Albanese Labor government has failed on a number of fronts, but particularly on the economy, on cost of living, health and defence, just to name a few items on this terrible scorecard. In relation to the economy and government spending, we've seen spending having ballooned to 27% of GDP, with revenue limping along at 25.5%. Now, aside from a temporary spike during the global pandemic, that means that government expenditure is at its highest levels since the Second World War. When I came to this place and delivered my maiden speech, I spoke about the fact that we want to make sure that government doesn't leave a burden for its future generations. Yeah. Now, what we've seen is the gap alone adding a $40 billion a year amount to the national credit card. We're seeing debt at over $1 trillion and $1.2 trillion at the time of the next election. And what does that mean? It means that for each of us here, every 60 seconds, looks like the power prices have gone up too much for this place as well.
The lights have gone out. Where's Bowen?
But it means that every 60 seconds,
I'm sure they'll come back.
We have $50,000 of expenditure just on the interest that we need to pay. We have a culture of dependence. Half of Australian voters now rely on the government for their primary source of income. That is not sustainable. We need a government that is actually going to increase the economic pie, generate wealth. And as I said in my maiden speech, governments don't create wealth, businesses do. And it's the private sector that needs to be supported and incentivised. But instead, what have we seen this government do? The private sector, where real wealth is created, is shrinking, with only 1 in 5 new jobs being created there, while the rest are taxpayer-funded. Now, I don't think those opposite had it in mind when they put forward this motion that we now need to celebrate being the country with the largest proportionate public service in the developed world. Now, I have respect for the public service, and my mother has served in the Australian public service for over 30 years. Yeah. But we need to make sure that we generate wealth in this country, and the private sector is the place to do so. On the cost of living front, in my electorate and across the country, food's up by 15%, housing by 19%, insurance 37%, gas 38%, and as we've seen in this place today, electricity is up 39%. The lights are out. The lights are out. On the health front, in my electorate of McPherson, despite those opposite claiming all the credit for Medicare and claiming all the credit for health and health management, bulk billing in my community has dropped 12% since Labor came to government. Right. And in some communities across Australia, and I feel for our regional colleagues, that amount has dropped by nearly 20%. On defence, the men and women of the Australian Defence Force, they represent the height of our national character, but they need to be supported. We have countries and allies around the world looking at us, asking us to join their path of leadership and commit a certain amount of money to ensure that our defence force is well equipped. And we're not doing that. Australia barely spends 2%. This motion that's moved by the Labor Party does nothing but congratulate themselves on this horrific record. And the Prime Minister appears to be living in some sort of a dangerous fantasy, oblivious to the soaring debt, to rising taxes, bloated government, collapsing productivity and energy delusions. For the sake of the Australian people, I really hope the government's next 6 months are better than the last.